Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum to everybody, honorable members, president and members of the Management Association of Pakistan, our chief guest, Amir Khan Saab, some very good colleagues and friends that are across different tables. It's really nice to be able to talk to the management cadre of Pakistan, who, by the way, I believe are very accomplished people, so we can't be teaching them anything. My involvement in ESG dates back to my involvement with the United Nations, where in 2015, just a year before 2014, when I joined New York, I was tasked to work with some colleagues on the Sustainable Development Goals. So as you may know, Sustainable Development Goals are really the underlying force behind the ESG. Pandemic and the growing threats from climate change in particular are driving a range of strategies and options to build back better, embark on green recovery, and get back on course for achieving sustainable growth and investment. I think mainstreaming ESG should be very self-evident, and it is a high-value proposition. It is a step ahead and reinforces corporate governance. It essentially captures non-financial risks ranging from corporates' emissions footprint to socially inclusive and governance management to deliver national and corporate stakeholder responsibilities in an effective manner. Corporates in Pakistan have thus far ventured selectively into sustainability reporting. I am a director at one of the leading firms of Pakistan, where they are about to publish a sustainability report. A coherent and coordinated effort is critical to adopt a holistic and powerful instrument such as ESG. ESG drives its inspiration and is tangent with SDGs and Paris Agreement, with E capturing the greenhouse gas emission targets as a guiding metric. Despite its growing significance in business world, there is no universal ESG framework nor an agreement on ESG model. The UN Principles of Reporting reported that assets under management in the ESG sector increased from $6 trillion to $104 trillion in 2020, data from UN PRI of 2021. ESG adoption has multiple determinants and expected outcomes. For instance, ESG can, 1, improve firm value and promote sustainability, promote differentiation and cost savings, and enhance employees' productive behavior and customer loyalty is something that drives ESG. 2, ESG reduces firms' downside risks, but corporates with ESG profiles with high carbon emissions have higher tail risk. Besides lifting sustainability, ESG promotes good financial performance. Around 70% of 2000 studies that were conducted found a positive relationship between ESG scores and financial returns, whether measured by equity returns or profitability or valuation multiples. All this is based on empirical evidence, not just one study, but several studies. Better ESG scores translate to about a 10% lower cost of capital as the risks that affect your business are being addressed, and are reduced if you have a strong ESG proposition. ESG attracts institutional investors given ESG embeds ethical investment practices that improves the performance of managed portfolios, increase returns, and reduce portfolio risks. The performance of ESG portfolios is based on investors' choice of ESG criteria rather than whether or not the investor is dealing with ESG product or not. ESG's materiality is different for each country, for each industry and company, as ESG factors vary by sector, industry, by nature of business, and weights can change over time. For example, weightage of the governance factor has increased from 19% in 2007 to finally now to 1/3 in 2020. Notably, oil gas industry needs to have strong focus on carbon emissions reduction. Pharmaceutical industry focus has to be on drug safety and quality, and manufacturing on resource use efficiency and water and wastage services. So there cannot be a prescriptive formula. Let me now move away from the empirical evidence, which is very persuasive, to talk about the steps required to develop ESG framework. We have had discussion for the last 6 months with a number of people from the industry, the leaderships, and also with the accounting firms, CFA, ACCA, and so on and so forth. So first, disclosure. ESG data collection, it's a big industry, and reporting are not commonly part of mandatory financial reporting. Companies are offering disclosures in their annual report or in a standalone sustainability reporting. Rating providers, plenty of them, are there to confuse you and are very expensive, but they use corporate disclosures to formulate ESG scores. And of course, every rating agency internationally has a fancy IT platform, and you can get everything you need to know from there. Each agency relies on its own analysts and algorithms to synthesize disclosure of ESG metrics, such as companies' carbon emissions, board diversity, or safety policies into separate ESG scores, which are often consolidated into one aggregate score. Institutional architecture is critical to align and harmonize approaches, data modalities, and accounting standards. So how do we gauge one oil industry versus another oil firm? The IFRS Foundation trustees announced the creation of new standard setting board, the International Sustainability Standards Board, to help meet this demand. And we will be collaborating with ICAP as a task force. So let me try to talk a little bit about the legal and regulatory framework. There is a lot of variation in legal and regulatory framework, but of course the core is the need to have institute carbon taxes, and for the financial sector to integrate ESG rules into their funding criteria so the corporates are forced into it. Currently, ESG relevant corporate laws in Pakistan have provisions for ESG forward businesses, and provisions are in the Companies Act, Code of Corporate Governance, and also in public sector rules. In Pakistan, 30 companies that report on ESG, either as a part of their reports or in a separate sustainability report, basically are doing so because they want to penetrate in foreign markets, the number one industry being textile exporters, which of course will not be able to export if they do not adopt ESG standards. And they have realized the Textile Association is working on this. I would be amiss if I didn't talk about Angro Corporation. It is to develop a forest restoration and carbon offset program. This project is to cost about 600 million with the goal of planting and protecting about 50,000 acres of forest area over 10 years. And there are other examples. WAPDA, as we know, floated the green Eurobond, and we have now nurtured Infrazamin from Karandas, which is a new private credit enhancement company, which will go a long way to facilitate ESG. And I'm talking to the CEO of Infrazamin on a regular basis to promote this. Let me then finally conclude with the work that we are doing in the task force. Because of the increased demand for ESG, we are trying to see if we could loosely institutionalize it, but keep the voluntary spirit in the beginning, but then eventually it'll have to be mandated. But for that, we have SECP to figure the more difficult task. I'm there to help you, Chairperson. I wanted to say one concrete way of getting into ESG is to move towards sustainable stock exchanges. Worldwide, now we have 110 sustainable stock exchanges, of which 26 stock exchanges globally require ESG disclosures. So moving to sustainable stock exchanges is something that I am trying to promote at the board level. And 45 exchanges have structured ESG index, 45 offer ESG bond segments, 69 exchanges offer SME listing platform, and a lot of them are offering ESG guidance and training. So the biggest force for the ESG will come from two institutions that I am working with. One is the Pakistan Institute of Corporate Governance, will be on the advisory frontier, and PSX, which ultimately will have to lead the listing companies, both the IPOs and the debt issuance. We also have a partnership now of the task force has a partnership with KPMG as knowledge partner, for which I am extremely grateful because it's all work with no fees. So with this, let me conclude by saying that we are collaborating. It's all about teamwork. We are working with some corporates. We are working with virtually every leading accounting agency, and we hope to bring in the knowledge and hopefully provide advisory services through the PICG, which the CEO of the PICG is working on. And with PSX, we hope to enhance their work on sustainability reporting, which they are encouraging the various listed companies to do so. So at some point, we will be the task force, which is doing collective work, and its partnerships, one of the goals of the SDGs, will hopefully require companies on a voluntary basis to issue ESG reporting guidelines. So we will hopefully work out what are the feasible ESG reporting guidelines for corporates and different industries and sectors. And then we will hope to work on different surveys. And once we have the baseline, we will work forward in getting analytical work done on the basis of that. So a lot of work to be done. I don't think this can be done overnight, but the value proposition is huge because we will be able to attract phenomenal amount of foreign capital flows, particularly the institutional investors' money into the ESG platform. So thank you very much for inviting me. And once again, it's a privilege to be addressing you all, the leaders of Pakistan.